So not more than a few days ago, the platform drafting committee for the DNC met and had a 9-hour meeting where they hashed out a number of different proposals for what should be on the Democrats' actual platform when we get to this convention. And as we had talked about just a couple of weeks ago, Bernie Sanders, because of his great success during the primaries, was able to put a number of people onto that panel. Not as many as Hillary Clinton and the DNC, working in tandem, were able to put on, but a number of people, and they were strong voices. Bernie Sanders picked very well when choosing those people, and as we expected, those people, including Bill McKibben and a couple of others that we broke down on the list, were strong and aggressive and progressive. They were the literal aggressive progressives, and they pushed for a number of extremely progressive parts of the platform. And unfortunately, as you might have heard, the scuttlebutt, those were largely shot down, although not universally. There is some good news. I'm going to focus on the bad news today, although I will try not to do that in general. And I am extremely disappointed that a number of extremely common sense progressive goals and ideals, which not only are good for the party and good for the country, but would actually help the eventual nominee to get elected if they were campaigning based on these things, were shot down. And so I want to talk about a few of those. Some of the most important include a ban on fracking, taking down the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Israeli occupation of Palestine, and then there are things like a carbon tax, single-payer health care, and a $15 minimum wage that would be tied to inflation, so it would actually keep pace with inflation, unlike previous minimum wage laws before. I want to talk about some of those in particular, because I understand why the DNC didn't agree to some of them. I don't agree with it, but I understand. And there's others that I don't even understand, and I'm trying to process that, and maybe you can help me with that. So, ending the Israeli occupation of Palestine. Is the DNC going to agree to that? No. Of course the DNC is not going to agree to that for whatever reason, and we could have a very long discussion about why historically this is. The Democrats, as well as the Republicans, are simply never going to say a bad thing about Israel. Obama said a couple of bad things, but then he largely went along with them afterward, even though he said that they should stop their illegal settlements and stuff like that, continuing to build into these areas that they're not supposed to be building in. So I'm not surprised about that, honestly. A push for single-payer health care. I think we should have a push for single-payer health care. But the Democrats largely don't agree, even though once you actually describe the program to the American people, it's very popular. This is one of the things that I think that you could actually win an election on if you were to campaign in a smart way about it. So they shot that down. I'm not surprised. Hillary Clinton was against it all throughout the primaries. This is not something that she wants. She says she's going to get us to 100% of the country being covered. I can't tell you how she's going to do that since she refuses to actually describe it in any detail. And so I'm not that surprised by that, honestly. A ban on fracking. Am I really surprised about that? No. Obviously, we have to ban fracking. Fracking is absolutely horrendous for the areas where it actually happens. This is an issue in which liberals and conservatives should be able to fight together, because conservatives are always saying, that's why they're so supportive of Brexit, how can an area have these consequences levied on it by people who live so far away? It's about sovereignty, man. Okay, well, if the plates in your area are being shattered by fracking, so that earthquakes become incredibly common, that your water supply is being destroyed, that should be an area where the needs of the locale are more important than the needs of politicians that live a long way away. I think that fracking is eventually going to be banned. But on this issue, the Democrats are largely spineless. I give Bernie so much credit for coming out throughout the primary as strong against fracking as he did. Hillary Clinton says that she's going to add some regulation to it. Well, that'll be amazing. But unfortunately, in the meantime, fracking is incredibly bad for our atmosphere. Fracking is closely tied with extremely hazardous and harmful methane emissions. And look, whatever regulations you can put on, I'm happy with, but I would be much happier if you simply stopped fracking in America, and especially stopped encouraging other countries to get into the fracking game, as Hillary Clinton did when she was Secretary of State. And so they could have gone the other way on this. Coming out against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that should have been the easiest thing in the world, absent money in politics. Because the American people, Democrat and Republican, absolutely hate the Trans-Pacific Partnership in particular, but anything like the Trans-Pacific Partnership right now. You could probably pull some Trump supporters if you were to come out hard against the TPP. The TPP is not just a disaster, it's a global disaster, and it's a global disaster that has in it the seeds for us not being able to get rid of it later on, and that's the most corrosive, horrendous, disgusting part of the TPP. You say that you're against the TPP. She keeps saying that she's not going to be outflanked by Sanders on these sorts of issues, and yet when we have the option of putting it into the platform, suddenly your surrogates, not so against the TPP. I don't care about what Obama's position is on the TPP right now. I care about what the next president's position is going to be, and that might be the single most depressing part of this, has to do with the TPP. Look, the carbon tax, I think that the carbon tax would go a long way towards warding off our influence in terms of heating the global climate, destroying the atmosphere. I think that that would be a great thing if we were able to fit it in, but unfortunately, we're not. So look, there's a raise to the minimum wage that was put in. That's certainly good. I don't know why we have to have what for some reason is a contentious argument about $12 or $15. Like, well, obviously we got to do $12. $15? How can we do $15? Why is nobody talking about $13? $14? I don't know exactly where you need to put it, but I don't understand why we have to come up with two numbers far apart from each other and then act as if, well, I mean, if we can't have $15, then we shouldn't have anything. And, well, $12, I mean, obviously we got to have 12. Just fucking compromise. Somewhere there's a number that we can get behind as a party. I know that not too long ago, I was thrilled that we even agreed on 12, that you could get enough actual Democratic politicians to sign on to that. But if you're so enthusiastically about 12, and you're not willing to accept 15, then let's talk about some 13s, okay? Let's talk about some 14s. I don't understand why that's so controversial. It's a room full of fucking liberals, supposedly. Why are they fighting so much about liberal principles? Now look, here's the thing that overall is depressing about this, and I'll try to wrap this up because I know that I'm going on, because I've been thinking about this for about 3 days, and I'm a little bit pissed off about it still. I understand why they can't simply allow me to come in and write the platform, okay? Because if I were to write the platform, and if I was to make it super lib and super progressive, then they think that that would scare off too many people and they wouldn't be able to be elected. And so the depressing thing about the Democratic Party for liberals and the Republican Party for conservatives, by the way, is that they have to be liberal or conservative, but they're always afraid that if they go too far, they'll lose elections. And they're not even 100% wrong about that, okay? There are liberal politicians that I think would have been awesome on the policies, but probably couldn't get elected, because our country is fucked up in a number of different ways, from the education system on to our graves, okay? We have a lot of issues. But the idea that you should be actively trying to prune out ideas that are not only morally right, that are not only a long time coming, but that are also incredibly popular, that flips that whole argument on its head, and it makes me have no sympathy then for the Democratic Party if they lose, or the Republican Party if they lose, by the way. If you have something that is both right and is a winner, then you're a fucking coward if you don't push for that. You're a moron and a coward. Those are basically two of the worst qualities that you can have, and you're somehow mixing them. And you've somehow gotten this far, implying that you're not a moron. You must have found a back door or something. Anyway, look, it's incredibly disheartening that so many important progressive priorities were shot down. Some did get through. Now, this is not the end, okay? The platform is one thing. He's still going to the convention. He's still bringing all of his aggressive progressives. We are still going to be fighting for those priorities there. And the platform is not the be-all, end-all, okay? Putting pressure on whoever ends up being the nominee, regardless of party, putting pressure on the House and on the Senate and on governors and on state legislatures, that is still incredibly important. And while it might not have been possible to get some of them on the platform now, some of these priorities, okay, 4, 8, or 12 years, there wasn't any chance of any of this, okay? You didn't have 6 or 7 votes for most of these things. You had nothing. And that is progress. And it's easy to look at a defeat and say, well, what's the difference if you lost? But there is difference. And we are rapidly moving in the right direction, okay? And the insane success that Bernie Sanders had through the course of these primaries is testament to that. Particularly when you think about the fact that those voting for him tended to be younger, those voting against him tended to be older. You do the math, too. 2 or 4 or 8 years from now, and you think about what this movement is going to be like and what this party can be like if we're willing to continually put pressure on it, okay, and push out the bad apples. Anyway, that's my thoughts about that. Let me know what you think.